Welcome to Against the Current, a podcast created to give public and private sector leaders, both current and emerging, as well as advocates and cultural voices, a platform to share their perspectives with candor and conviction. Each episode goes beyond talking points to uncover the real stories, challenges, and lessons shaping today's most important causes. These conversations connect directly to decision makers, donors, and supporters who want to understand not just what an organization does, but why it matters. You'll hear how faith guides leadership, how conviction drives action, and how bold ideas are shaping the future of freedom and culture, both here at home and around the world. Here is your host, Matt Waters.
Welcome, Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. We're glad you're here. Grover, you and I go back a number of years. I was a young man when I first attended your Wednesday meetings back in 1993 with the Gingrich Revolution. And those days were so memorable. In fact, I remember PBS did a series, I think it was Frontline or something. They came in, you let them into the bullpen, and they did a story on your Wednesday meetings that are still going on. And so you've been a huge influence on conservative politics, Republican politics, presidents, state capitals with your no tax pledge. And I'm sort of stealing your thunder, but tell people who Grover Norquist is and how did you get to become the president of Americans for Tax Reform? What's the genesis of that?
Sure. I grew up in Massachusetts prior to emigrating to the United States. So I came down after college and for a year ran the National Taxpayers Union, which was the only taxpayer group in Washington, D.C. anyway, at the time. Went back to business school and did 2 years at business school. Came down and got involved I knew I wanted to do political work. And that's what I studied at business schools. How do you structure political organizations to make them work? Because you don't have profit as the way to measure whether things are working or not. McDonald's knows whether it's winning or losing, but politicians and political movements don't always know. Certainly in the short term, they don't necessarily have a good sense of that. So then worked with college Republicans, helped set up some of those structures there, and Americans for the Reagan Agenda, which was a group to support the Reagan administration, kind of like Americans for Tax Reform later was for Reagan on taxes. Americans for the Reagan Agenda was broader. And then the Reagan people wanted to do the Tax Reform Act of 1986. So in 1985, they asked if I would run it. And we started with a campaign to support taking marginal tax rates down, broadening the base, but it was to be revenue neutral because the Democrats weren't willing to give us a second tax cut, but they were willing. They knew that lower tax rates mattered. They knew that was a good idea. They lied when they opposed it in 81 and 82 and 83. And many Democrats still voted against it, but the leadership of the Democrats knew that they needed to be part of a pro-economic growth policy. To get the support for Republicans for the Tax Reform Act of 86, I created the Taxpayer Protection Pledge, which is a very simple pledge. I promised to the people of my district or to my state, House and Senate, that I will oppose and vote against all efforts to raise taxes. So not just I'll vote against it at the last minute, I'll oppose it and vote against it, which means you can't vote for it in committee and do all the things to get it ready, then step back and go, well, I'm not the guy who touched it last. Oppose and vote against. The vote against is easier to hold people to, but we do remind them that the opposed part is important also. And we got 20 senators to sign the pledge, president, 100 congressmen in that effort. But it was so successful in the election of 1986, people used it in their campaigns, not just as a reminder for this one vote, but this is who I am. I will not vote for tax increases. That's me. That's not the other guy that I'm running against. So that grew and grew. The Democrats actually sued us, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, unsuccessfully. They said, you're you're endorsing these candidates. And I didn't endorse anybody. Well, but when you say they won't raise taxes, I said, yes, they take a pledge. We will highlight that pledge. And the Democrats go, but everybody knows that's the right answer. Everyone knows that's the right answer. Well, would you tell your Democratic candidates that, please? Uh, and it grew and grew in general support. And we started working in states. I think New Jersey and Massachusetts were two of the first ones. Now, um, 2/3 of Republican governors in the country have signed the pledge at present, and that will grow after the next set of elections. And we have quite a number of state legislators who've taken the pledge. Unfinished business is to work with all mayors and local government officials. There are so many, it is so deep, it is a difficult project line. We opportunistically find some who then want to do it, but we're not there yet on having that really something that everybody understands. Every congressman, every state legislator, every governor, every presidential candidate knows they're expected to sign the pledge, and if they don't, they better, they need to explain themselves as to what it is, because people who won't put in writing, and this is what's different. A lot of people make promises. I think raising taxes is the wrong thing to do now. What did he actually just say? He said won't do it now. Now is actually 3 seconds ago. So now isn't even now anymore. Uh, so, but the pledge is never, and the pledge is clear. There are no weasel words. I've never had somebody come and say, "Well, I didn't vote for a tax increase." Yes, you did. It's in the newspaper.
So you guys, Grover, you all are the. I mean, you mentioned starting with the National Taxpayers Union, I think, but today, and there's also the Fair Tax Group that's out there. But you guys are still, to me, kind of number one in that area. You're the 800-pound gorilla. Would you? I mean, that's a softball to you. I guess you'd take that if someone hands it to you. But honestly, I mean, some of these groups, it's like the tax issues kind of. So, the only two certain things are death and taxes. In fact, when I met you, I was an executive director for 60 Plus Association, and we were fighting the federal, state, and income tax, the estate tax, state and gift tax, and we called it the death tax. And, people were really, taxes, of course, are a big issue, right? And it's like, you're talking about 86 and Reagan, and, I, we're not talking about taxes a lot, at least at the federal level, I don't think. And there's even a question of even capitalism itself. I mean, since that time, our country has evolved. I'd love to get your kind of thoughts on where is the tax movement today? I mean, look, again, fair tax is kind of gone. They've just disappeared. I mean, I was kind of a fair tax guy. I thought it was kind of cool. Get rid of the IRS. That's what I liked most of all. Get rid of the IRS, right? And get rid of what is it, the 16th Amendment? The tax amendment? Yeah, get rid of the 16th Amendment and get rid of the IRS. Well, I'm on board. And so but those things, it's like the movement and I'd say not the movement. I think that people are with us, but the politicians don't talk about it a lot. I mean, and Trump doesn't seem like a real big anti-tax guy. Maybe I'm wrong. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess several things there. One is whenever the Republicans take control of the House, Senate, and the presidency, the first thing they do is cut taxes. That was true for Trump. First act as an elected president was to put forward and support a tax cut that was largely written by the House and the Senate in previous years. He added some very important pieces to it, taking the corporate income tax all the way to 15 that he was pushing for. And then we won that fight. And that's what gave us growth in 2019 of very strong growth.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't talk about it very much, or maybe that's part of it, right? I mean, one of the criticisms of Trump, he's not taking victory laps. He moves so quickly, and the Democrats kind of owned the debate on the shutdown a little bit until they didn't, like yesterday. They decided to flip, but he wasn't really pushing back much. But anyway, keep going there. But so he took the yeah.
And then again, as soon as he got reelected in 2024, his first project was a $4 trillion tax cut and making it permanent, not just out 10 years, but permanent. So the central act, the big beautiful bill, was largely a series of tax cuts. Now, also some good budget cuts. And if you're cutting taxes, you are limiting the amount of money available to people to spend and waste and use to hire Democratic precinct workers, which is what they do with the money. You let them have it. Uh, so if you look at the states, there have been there is something called Oobleck Republicans. Do you remember the Dr. Seuss story of Oobleck, where the king is very unhappy? It's a children's story. Very unhappy because he's bored of fog, rain, and snow and sun. Boring, boring, boring. Like tax cuts, spending cuts, deregulations, trying to fit. Boring. Okay. And so can't we try something new? So he was, and so they invented. He had his wizards invent Oobleck. Oobleck comes down. It's green. It sticks everything together. The next 10 pages of the book are everybody being stuck together and not being able to get anything done. Finally, he has to apologize, and then the Oobleck goes away. Uh, there are constantly, and this is not just in the last couple of years, although you've seen it again a couple of years ago. The new guy gets on the block and he says, "I want to be a public intellectual," and somebody needs to tell him, "This is not France. Public intellectuals in Sartre, Camus are considered interesting in France. Here, no. Okay, we want to hear the guy who builds rockets. Okay, that's pretty cool." Uh, but the guy who comes up with a new theory of how the rest of us should run our lives is not terribly interesting. And so they go, "Oh, let's try something new other than tax cuts, deregulation, and the Constitution." It really is yesterday's news.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, people want to have a novel approach to things, right? And there is a generation of people of kids who don't know 1986 tax cuts, for example, or even who Ronald Reagan was. They have no idea. And so you're educating a whole new generation of people inside. And as they say, a young you're a liberal hippie, and then you get older, you become a conservative because you start paying taxes, right? I think it's largely true. One thing you touched on was I love this, the comparison, of America and France, right? So, we know what an American is. We know it's embellished in the Constitution, the ideas of liberty. I kind of think America was an idea. I mean, a lot of people are pushing back on that. No, it was not really. Yeah,
It is. It is. They lie when they say it's not.
yeah, and the French. What do you say about the French, right? What is France, right? Is it a croissant, or I don't? I'm not really sure what it is. It's kind of all over the place, right? But to your point,
Those stupid debate things you always back into.
what was that?
It's the stupid bidet things you back into in the bath.
Right, right, that's right. But but you touched on something that's very almost Neanderthal in America, right? You talked about the Leave Us Alone coalition, right? We just want the government out of our business. And one of my contentions that, the shutdown, we're talking during the government shutdown, the longest ever apparently. But I sit back and think, well, I haven't missed the government at all. I think there's millions of people, except for the federal workers, of course, who are missing a paycheck. Millions of workers are just sitting back thinking, well, what am I actually paying 20% of my income for, right? What am I getting in return for that? I mean, it's not like Netflix. I can say, well, they've got some great movies on this month, and I'm going to continue paying them whatever, $20 a month. And I have the option to opt out of Netflix. Here, the government shuts down, and I got to keep paying them 20%, and I'm not really sure what it's going for, right? Um, but tell me about the Leave Us Alone coalition. What kind of your theory on that?
I was told, I think correctly, by somebody who said that I have three contributions to the modern conservative movement. One is the pledge, where you actually make an idea permanent, easy to understand. And the pledge doesn't solve all the world's problems. Some people go, you should add to it. You should do this on spending. Well, as soon as you start adding to it, you're writing a political uh, propaganda piece, not drawing a line in the sand. If you got 20 lines in the sand and this, and this, because they go, well, you stepped over this line. They go, but I didn't step over the other 19. It stands alone. I've had people come and go, why are you mad at me for raising taxes? I'm pro-life. I go, you know what? Talk to the pro-life organizations. They will give you a cookie, but you raise taxes and you don't get points for some other, but I won't steal your guns. How about that? That's good too. The NRA handles that. This is between you, the taxpayers, and we highlight your position and make it public. And then when the breaking of the pledge defeated one of the most successful presidents we've had, George Herbert Walker Bush, managed the collapse of the Soviet Union without blood on the floor. He kicked Iraq out of Kuwait without sitting on top of Iraq for 20 years to see what happens. I mean, any number of successes that people thought were not possible to ever do. He has one problem. On his tombstone, it says, lied and raised taxes. That's not fair to him. The guys who talked him into that and pushed him into traffic really did him a disservice. Uh, but the rest of the world saw him do that and goes, I get it. You're a Republican, never raise taxes, done. And since 1994, uh, no Republicans voted for a tax increase at the federal level. And before 94, for 62 years, Congress was won by the Republicans twice, once under Eisenhower, once under Truman, twice in 64 years, as the party that might raise your taxes. When 96% of Republicans signed the pledge in 94 and on, what happened? We're the party that will not raise taxes. 18 years, the Republicans won both houses. 6 years, the Democrats won both houses. 6 years, it was divided. So the Republicans went from not even on the playing field for 62 years. Laughingstock, Washington General, okay, 62 years. Now, more dominant than not. So the pledge mattered. But the other one that you mentioned is the center right meeting, which is very helpful. And but the Leave Us Alone coalition is what allowed the center right meetings to work, because you had to understand them. And that is the observation that in the modern Republican Party, if you sit around the table, I've given this speech to 1,000 Republican groups who all go, yes, you have just defined why I'm in this room and why everybody else is in this room. And that is, if you go around the table, the people in the modern Republican Party are there because on their vote moving issue, they want to be left alone by government. That doesn't mean they're libertarians on everything. But if you vote on the Second Amendment, you're a Republican. If you want to be left alone with the right to protect yourself and your family. You don't go around. I served on the board of the NRA for 18 years. We didn't go around insisting that knock, 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 you should be a hunter, knock, knock, knock. Here's a book your children will read in school called Heather Has Two Hunters. And people who care about homeschooling, about being left alone to homeschool. Homeschooling was illegal in most states before 1986. It was a crime. It was a go to jail crime. Now they went all the spelling bees. Businessmen don't wreck my business. Taxpayers don't raise my taxes. People of faith, let me practice my religion. And the other guy who who completely misunderstands Leviticus, he can go to Hades on his own. But we're not going to tell him what to do, but we want to be left alone. And so around the table, the person who wants to make money all day, and the person who wants to fondle his guns all day, and the person who wants to go to church all day, they don't necessarily have tea. They don't necessarily live in the same neighborhoods. They don't go to the same church, I guess. But they vote for the same candidate who stands in the middle of the circle and says, I will not raise your taxes. I will not steal your guns. I will not regulate your business out of business, and I will protect your faith and leave you alone. This is what makes our coalition work. It's a low maintenance coalition because nobody wants anything on the first primary issue that interferes with anyone else. If you're allowed to have your Second Amendment rights, and I want to go to church, and this guy wants to go to private school or to homeschool, or to and somebody else who wants to go to church all day or work with their guns, we're not in conflict. There's no thing that you want to do that bothers me. You're free to do what you do. I'm free to do what I do. And that understanding lets you know there's a new group that has a new issue. Do you let them in? Do they chase anybody out of the coalition? Because if they start with, I got a great idea. First, we raise taxes to get me money. No, 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 no. Because now you're stepping on the taxpayers. Or, well, I've got this great idea and we should tell everybody that they have to do this at church. No, you can't do that. Apart from the First Amendment, it breaks up the Republican coalition. So that effort is makes it easy for our team to understand what they're doing. I once got a call from a New York reporter who'd been on the listening tour with Hillary Clinton. And with Hillary Clinton's, did a listening tour in upstate New York when she first ran for Senate. Lady from Arkansas ran for mayor and for Senate in New York. If she'd done a talking tour, she'd have lost, but she did a listening tour. So, and she said what progressives need is one of these uh, center-right meetings like Grover has. And uh, so the press guy called and said, "What do you think about that?" And I outlined the center-right coalition. Okay. It is a leave us alone coalition. That's the meeting that we have. The people who work in all of those zones are invited to meet and talk about what they're doing, so everybody understands what everybody else in the meeting is doing. And sometimes you can have an idea and you want to fix things, but if you fix it one way, you step on other people's toes. If you fix it a different way, I mean, public schools. Should you have prayer in public schools? Well, how about if anyone's allowed to choose whatever school they want to, and they can have whatever prayer they want, or not? Okay, and the one vastly expands liberty, and the other gets you no end of fights among all the people of faith who go, "No, my prayer should be the one that we include." And all of a sudden, those of us who are trying to protect religious, or thought they were trying to protect religious freedoms and parental rights, end up with this unnecessary conflict. Go to school choice, and now there's no conflict. Now you want to go to Baptist school? Do you want to go to Catholic school? Great, this is good. I'm going to something else. And so as you when you introduce a new project or see a new problem, fix it in a way that reduces the size and scope and power and cost of government, rather than one that tries to add a new stupid program on top of the failed stupid programs of the last 200 years. Uh, so that so on that, yeah, I was asked, can they do that? And I said, well, here's how the Republican coalition works. I said the left coalition is not uh, doesn't have the same advantage. Everybody around the left's coalition wants something from the government. Trial lawyers, let me sue people and destroy other people's businesses and livelihoods so I can be rich. Labor union bosses, let me take money from the workers and tell them what to do and what they'll settle for, and and I'll get rich doing that. Big city political machines, give me a bunch of money so I can hire my friends to be Democratic precinct workers to help elect me. And you go around the table, everybody there wants something. We're environmentalists, and we want to make everybody do things because of global cooling or global warming or global change. It changes from time to time. Just give me stuff and give me power. Um, because crisis. And all around the table, those guys, as long as there's money in the center of the table to pay them all off, it looks like that scene after the robbery in the movie, around the table, one for you, one for you, one. Everybody gets $100 bill, everybody gets $200 bills, and keep going around. Everybody's happy. But if you don't have as much money, and you can't, because we've cut taxes and we're not letting you have more, now you start pushing other people away from the table. Their coalition is made up of competing parasites.
As you talked about the Leave Us Alone coalition. And I think big picture, right? I think there's a overall governance kind of idea here, right? Trusting the people versus trusting the government and the people in Washington. It's the establishment versus the people. Richard Viguerie, my old boss, wrote a book called The Establishment versus the People. It's an age-old thing. And you trust the people, and you also have a dynamic view of analysis when it comes to like taxes, right? So the Democrats would say, they'd make the case, they used to make the case that if you raise taxes, that you'll have this much more money come into Washington, period. And the Republican would counter, no, what happens is people shelter their money, and maybe less money comes to Washington as a result of your tax increases, right? So you have a dynamic view. People will not, it's just not a static view that if you cut, like that was what the case they made against the estate and gift tax was, I think it was $12 billion annually or something to that effect. And the Democrats said, well, if you cut that, that means $12 billion won't come to Washington every year. And we said, oh, no. Actually, you'll probably raise $50 billion because people will invest that money, create new jobs, make more taxpayers. Thus, you'll actually have more money coming into the federal treasury because of that action. But so what I'm saying, you trust in the human action, the human element, that the people are going to do things that we quite honestly don't know exactly what they're going to do, but you trust them to do it and act in their own interests. There's that sense of which, that's just a very different dynamic than the left, right?
Yes. You also have the situation where the left doesn't seem to understand secondary consequences. That we're gonna have, rent control, says Mondami in New York City. Okay? Rent will be lower and it won't be able to go up. Now, who is going to repair or who is going to build new rental housing if you put the price below what somebody can make a living doing? So now you're going to have fewer, uh, rental spaces. The price will be technically lower, but there'll be a lot of people who simply can't get one. Uh, it was a Swedish socialist who pointed out that, uh, rent control is I think I wasn't sure if he said second only to aerial bombing or, worse than aerial bombing or faster to destroy a city than aerial bombing is. It's up there with aerial bombing as a policy because of the secondary effects. And a lot of our friends on the left, I think dishonestly in terms of the leadership, but others sort of leading their lives and just looking up and somebody says, "I have a solution for you." They go, "Oh, okay, you're gonna make my it'll cost less for me to have a rent a place because you're gonna put a cap on it." In Argentina, when they abolished the caps on rental in Buenos Aires under the new government, um, rents went up for a while, and then I mean, this whole thing was a year ago, and then they went way down because people with a second house, all of a second room said, "Well, I'm gonna rent it because I can make enough money to make it worth my while, and I'm not gonna get stuck with somebody who refuses to leave, uh, my house," and and now rents have gone down. More rental housing, lower prices. Why? Because no regulations, not because of smart regulations. I get these love these guys who go, "We're gonna do smart regulations." Um, really? Do you think the last guys thought they were doing stupid regulations? They thought they were being smart too, but nobody's smarter than the market. Nobody's smarter than 340 or something million Americans deciding what the price of socks will be. There's no vote. It's just they decide. You can make stocks as much as you want, but they'll be decided by the consumers as to what the prices are. And when Nixon put on price controls on energy to keep energy costs down, people stopped looking for energy in America. When and stopped selling it to us from other places, Reagan came in, got rid of price controls on oil and not on oil particularly, and the price went down, not up, went down. Uh, so that's one of the challenges we have with our friends on the left. They think the American people are stupid, and they think if you say to them, "We'll pass a law that says this will happen," that that will happen, and not that that's the first thing will happen is the people will be poked. How do they react? Well, that's a good question. Maybe we should think about that before we pass the law.
Yeah, and that's happening right now. I mean, right, the front page of, the morning newspapers, or I guess online now, are talking about the ACH funding, right? So the Obamacare funding, the subsidies that the feds are sending are disappearing. So people's health care, including my own, is going to double. It's going to go up 100% because of these subsidies that the government's been feeding to, to consumers. So that goes away. And, my guess is there are gonna be hundreds of thousands of people in the ACH who on December 31st are not gonna be in the ACH because they're gonna say, "We can't afford 100% increase on our health care," and they're getting out, and they'll find alternatives, right?
You've seen this the studies that tens of millions of people get signed up for, Obamacare but never use it. They're being signed up probably by insurance companies who maybe the person doesn't quite know he's he has this thing that he bought. Uh, so yeah, the when government subsidizes something, education should be lower costs. College should cost less. Well, we'll make loans, we'll make subsidies, we'll shower taxpayer dollars on state schools and universities. And the price of education has gone way, way up. Now, I mean, it's not any more sophisticated than when Sophocles sat on the side of a road and talked to 10 people. Uh, and because it's subsidized and they subsidize the teachers and everything else, uh, the cost keeps going up, both to parents and to as payers and to parents as taxpayers. Healthcare, the more the government's gotten involved, the cost of healthcare has shot up. Whenever the government gets involved in something with subsidies, it doesn't reduce the cost. First of all, it hides some of the cost. There's the cost of what you pay, and then there's hidden cost, taxpayer dollars subsidizing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good point. So America's for Tax Reform. One thing I'll say is that your name is your mission statement. I love that. There's so many organizations that have a name that has nothing to do with their mission. So, you are a board member of the National Rifle Association. I'm a lifetime member.
Parental rights association, I'm on their board too. That we're clear about what that is.
Yeah, great name. So I would commend anyone listening and watching to, if you're going to start a not-for-profit, make sure the mission statement's in the name. As an evangelical Christian, some of us, we do goofy things like call it like John 3:16. It's like, okay, that's fine. It's a great verse, but what are you doing, right? It's kind of weird, right? Um, but that's a good thing. So what are you all doing today? What's America's for Tax Reform doing today? What's your mission and your vision as you're in the golden age of Trump?
Two big projects at Americans for Tax Reform. One we've been working on for 12 years and we'll be working on for the next 12 years. And that is working with governors and state legislators, primarily in red states, because that's where you can do it. But we talk to everybody. Uh, and that is to phase the income tax down to a single rate and then down to zero. There are 8 states today that have no income tax. There are 15 states that have a single rate tax. And the reason why a flat rate or single rate tax is important is that when everybody pays 4% and you say, the politicians go, I want to go to 5. Everybody goes, we're listening. What? What am I paying for? What is this? Because everybody gets hit. And the politicians in Illinois, very left wing, very corrupt, in Illinois, you have a constitutional barrier. Any income tax has to be one single rate. It's 4.95, just under 5%. Other left wing states, California is about 15% income tax top rate. Our friends in New York, about over 10%. New Jersey, 10%. Minnesota, about 10%. Vermont, about 10%. But under 5% in Illinois. Why? Because they can only raise taxes on everyone. And even the Democrats with 2/3 super majorities in both houses are scared to death of showing the people of Illinois how much their stupid ideas cost them in tax dollars. And everybody can go, 5% of what I earn, I got it. I know what you're taking. I am not fooled. So this is a very, very important project, get to flat. And then when you hit flat, to take it from 5 to 4, okay, everybody, it's going from 5 to 4. And then the left says, what about billionaires? Well, they're going from 5 to 4 like everybody else. Okay. Only you take envy off the table. So getting a flat rate, we have now, in the last 4 years, 7 states have moved to a single rate tax. 7. So half of the states that have single rate taxes did so in the last 4 years, as opposed to the previous 100 years. When 4 states did it to start with, 4 states changed in 100 years. In the last 4 years, 7 states have done it. 3 states have passed a law that says in the next several years, we're going to click down to where it is. Our friends in Oklahoma and in West Virginia and in Kansas have all voted to go to a single rate tax.
Well, let me ask you this, Grover. So, a place like Texas has no income tax, correct? And they have a huge property tax. I mean, it may, it, where it puts another grand on your, your mortgage monthly, right? So that's not insignificant. And there's talk, I think DeSantis is talking about ending property taxes so people can actually own property for once. I like the idea because just fundamentally, I think we should own property and not pay the bank for 30 years and then pay the state. And if you don't pay the state, well, then you're out. What say you about property taxes? I mean, because income taxes, if states get rid of income taxes, or they're relying, I'm guessing, on property taxes by and large, correct?
No. What happens when the reason why Florida people assume that, well, if you don't have an income tax, it must all be on sales or property or somewhere else. That assumes that Florida raises taxes as high as New York. Okay. Florida has more people in it, 2.5 million more people in Florida than New York. New York is smaller than Florida. That's how Florida's grown and New York has declined relative to the rest of the country. Now, when they do that, they have more people, but Florida spend this is like a year-old number, 115 billion in a year, 115. New York, with the same number of people, somewhat fewer, 230. They spend twice as much, more than twice as much per person in New York than in Florida. So that's 115 billion New York that Florida doesn't have to raise. Texas also spends more. New Hampshire spends more. All the Tennessee, all the zero state tax, they spend less in taxes. So it's not like they move it from, oh, it's over here and we put it over there. We take it off the income tax and put it on the sales tax. These are less spending because, well, if you don't have an income tax, you don't have this gusher of tax revenue coming in every time there's a strong period of growth, at which point the politicians decide to spend everything that came in as if it was always going to come in that way. And the next time that any teeny, it just starts to grow the same amount instead of surging for it. Now all of a sudden you got to raise taxes to make up for all the new spending that you put in because you thought you had a forever cash flow that was $1 jillion, but you don't now.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, Texas meets the state body meets every other year for like what, 3 months or something? I mean, it's a very short term. And I get it. I know, I'm sure you're in Texas quite a bit, and it's just super highway after super highway. There are more tolls in Texas than New Jersey. But so they're getting people that way. But that's mostly paying for the roads, right? For the infrastructure that they need. And you can opt out of that, but you have to go the long way or whatever, right? Um, so it's still up to people to do that. Well, let's I'm gonna shift gears a bit, and so you've been in conservative politics, for lack of a better term, right of center, for 45 years, something around there, and there are a lot of young people, a lot of MAGA young people coming into the movement, and what say you to them? I mean, what tools would you what would you say to the young people coming into the movement? Like, what do you need to do? What do you need to know? What books do you need to read? Kind of what, and I'd also like to get to your cadence in your own personal life. I mean, is Grover Norquist going on 4 hours of sleep every night? Is he, is he reading, 100 books a year? What's your cadence? What's your rhythm of life as a leader in the movement?
Start with advice to young people. Have 360-degree vision. Work and find the center right coalition in your state, or country. The meeting that we have, the Leave Us Alone Coalition meeting in Washington, D.C., there are 45 states that have similar meetings. A number of states have multiple meetings. Florida has 4. New York has 2. Kentucky has 2. Missouri has 3. Uh, and our goal is to get more second cities. So not just the big city or the capital, but other cities. In Orlando, it's mostly locally elected officials that meet, but they talk about what's going on, so that everybody knows what everybody else is doing. It reduces conflict within the conservative movement. The press always likes to call one conservative leader or elected official and asks them to criticize another guy who then gives another wonderful quote to the Washington Post to criticize the other person. Uh, General rule, I would never take a call about another conservative without or a congressman or senator without first calling that guy and say, "Do you know they're writing a story on you? Are you aware of?" Sometimes the answer is, "No." Yes, nobody told me. Sometimes it's, "Yes, we do." And we think the guy's gonna be honest or we're worried about it. And so so you help them out by letting them know it's there. And there's very little value to be had in criticizing other conservatives. Some of our least constructive conservatives, I'm now criticizing conservatives, some of the least constructive ones are the people who aren't good enough in the World War I to shoot all the way across to the other trenches to hit the enemy, but they can turn down their trench and shoot at their own team. One, they weren't expecting it. Aha. And two, they're stuck in the trench. And three, they're closer. And and by the way, if I shoot at that other guy, he's gonna shoot back at me. So, it's a cheap shot.
So you're advocating Reagan's 11th commandment, speak no ill of your fellow Republican, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I think you wanna talk to people that are drifting off in the wrong direction. If they repeatedly do so in a way that's destructive, you can speak up at it, but first you call them and say, "When you do this, do you understand what else it leads to and how you think you've got a good idea here, but you're stepping on 3 other parts of the modern conservative movement that you may not have thought through that you are." Um, if somebody r can't help themselves and wants to trash other people, or go off in some distance, there's a, new conservative movement that, believes in giving labor union bosses more power over union members. What? Where's that come from? Um, that's bizarrely evil.
Or the what about a universal basic income, right?
Then you have well, Richard Nixon thought that something like that instead of all the welfare programs, okay? Every once in a while, you get a conservative who says, "Why don't we get rid of all of these programs and just do this one big program that makes more sense?"
Direct transfer, right.
Good luck getting rid of the ones that are established. You have just given the left a new pipeline of cash, and they won't get rid of the old ones. And don't kid yourself that you're going to, or go abolish them first, then tell me about something where you might step in and do more differently. So there are a lot of reforms that if you were king, you might get away with it. If you could pass them and everybody lived with them for 5 years and they agreed they didn't wanna go back, but the other team has at bats too, okay? Your team gets to hit sometimes, and the other team gets to hit sometimes, and you can't assume that the left won't take advantage of something that you offer. There was an effort early on in that, let's have the government close down the economy by, having less energy available. And they said, "Let's have a tax on carbon dioxide, what people breathe, um, because that will raise the cost of most energy that we use in the world. Uh, and then we'll eliminate all of the regulations." And there are people who wander around and go, "Let's do that." If you talk to the left people, they go, "There is no way we're ever giving up any of the regulatory burden on the energy industry, which we're trying to destroy. And you're trying to make it an efficient way to force them to do something. It that's not our goal. We're not looking for an efficient way to use energy." Uh, so you can the guys on our team, if you're not talking to other people, and we have a weekly meeting in DC, the center right meeting, mostly monthly in other states, 24 countries have similar meetings. And so talk to each other and say, if you got an idea, try it out internally. What about this? And then somebody will raise their hand and go, "Here's why that might bounce back and hit you in the head, and why it might do more damage." What the left would do when they take the name of your idea and then fill the bag, uh, with their stuff instead of your stuff. Um, but you agreed on the concept to do X, and the left will then decide what X actually is. So we need to learn from each other in the center right.
I think that's really good. I think, talking to each other, I think we do I think we do a very good job. I think we do a very good job of that. And there is always you're right, the Republicans are known for being a circular firing squad. We all shoot at each other, sort of. It's happening right now nationally on certain issues. Not to necessarily go there, but there are ideas that are floating out there that are outside of the mainstream. And again, I'm a free speech advocate. I like, hey, you can frankly do as long as you're not hurting me, beating me up and taking my stuff. It's fine. I think it's a free country, and you can associate, disassociate with whoever you want to. Um, but I like the idea that we talk to each other. I think that's good. I think forcing people not to have conversations, top down, monarchy, aristocracy kind of politics. That it cuts me. I mean, even if I disagree with someone, I'm going to fight for the right to say it. I don't really care I mean, it's fine. I may disagree with it, but I want them to be able to say it. That's the country we live in, right? And that's um, and those ideas will flesh themselves out and be accepted or rejected by the masses. And okay, fine. Well, let's go to so the advice you give to conservatives is meet, talk to each other, get dialed in. What what literature have you read? Do you recommend, like, here are 3 conservative books that changed me, or even, whatever? Do you take any magazines? Do you anything you like a required reading for you?
I became more of a conservative because, during the Cold War, I was reading Witness by Whittaker Chambers, I Led Three Lives by Kim Philbrick, all of the, anti-communist literature books that were written on this subject, and recognized the dangers of Soviet socialism, National Socialism, because you see it in its most horrific form, uh, in other countries. But you see watered down versions of it in, abuses by government here from time to time. They'll come steal your house, uh, and tax you too high and push you around and tell you, how to run your kids. And so government could be too abusive here. And but I read about the horrors of socialism, state socialism in other countries, Benito Mussolini's Italy, and so on. I think it would pay for any conservative to read Witness by Whittaker Chambers to understand the 70-year struggle against the Soviet Union, and that many Americans, millions of Americans, 2 or 3, voted for the Communist Party at a time when they were committing mass murder on their own people. They were determined to destroy the United States. They were trying to shut down people's religious liberty. Um, and yet we had many, many people inside the country who supported for and voted for the Communist Party. So I think it's very important for people to understand not how close we came to losing that fight, but I don't know that we came very close, but the depth of the fact that people inside the United States could end up seduced. We think of some of these other countries as barbarians because how could they not know better than they did, uh, as they got swamped by the Soviets or the National Socialists. So, I think that's an important one. Um, there are many doors into the modern conservative movement. Um, Ayn Rand's writings are probably the most widely read conservative publications on a regular basis. There was I know that it's Will William Buckley's 100th anniversary, and he, said, "Oh, the Randians are out because Ayn Rand wasn't religious." And, um, in one of the Wednesday meetings, somebody had said that, and somebody who had come into the conservative movement through Ayn Rand's writings, Atlas Shrugged, We the Living, um, uh, brought in a list of how many books of William F. Buckley's were sold every year, and how many by Ayn Rand, and Ayn Rand's up there, like, with the Bible, in terms of numbers of sold today, not when she was alive and writing, but today, uh, and it is a door into the modern conservative movement, and there are many doors into an American conservative movement. This I mean, she fled communist Russia.
Yeah, and, and look, I as an evangelical, and, she didn't like God a whole lot. I don't think believed in God or whatever, and actually attacked Whittaker Chambers, I believe, in that book particularly. But I think, look, I love her writing, and if you read her writing today, it sounds like it's out of the front. It's so relevant, right? And on the church thing, I mean, she was coming out of a state church, the Russian state church, which was not good news when she left. So I get how she came to her views on religion. And okay, fine, it's a free country, but right. I mean, I think the Buckley driving people out, I learned that from, I think it's George Nash's book, The Conservative Intellectual Movement since 1945. He talked about this, and it's fascinating to see kind of the break between the conservatives and 1945. It went, with Buckley, and the kind of the social conservative movement, and left out the Hazlitts and the Milton Friedmans and the Ayn Rands because they weren't with them on, his religious views or whatever. So I found that really fascinating. I'm with you. I'm a big tent guy. I mean, I think people get there all different manner of ways. The book that transformed me, and unbeknownst, I was a student Democrat in high school.
Many people I've heard more people say, "I read Rand and I became a conservative/libertarian." Um, and, I mean, American conservatives are libertarian compared to European, uh, guys. Um, and, I mean, it's Ronald Reagan who said that libertarianism is the heart and soul of modern conservatism, which means it's sort of the central building block. "Leave me alone, let me be free, build out." Um, but, the Hayek, um, his book, Road to Serfdom, was a game changer, uh, where he really, is one of the well-read things that was in the, Reader's Digest as a shortened version, smaller, book. That really explains the dangers of all the people, "Let's do something good with the government." Okay, well, why does that turn into a tragedy? Why does that turn into dictatorship? And he makes the case that all efforts to expand state power that way will end badly, and they have historically. There's no pleasant, cheerful, very large government in the world, very powerful government, in the world.
Yeah, yeah, right. And the book that happened upon, it happens to be probably in vogue right now, but it's Will Shirer's book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And they say if you put a swastika on a book, it increases book sales. So maybe I was one of those kids that bought the book because I thought, okay, this is dangerous, whatever, foreboding. And I read the book, and it made me a conservative. I was a card carrying Democrat. And when I read it, I thought, wait a minute, these guys want to take away the guns. They want to extinguish the church. They want to take over the whole industry. They're sort of doing what communists do, and they're called fascists. And it's crazy that, the right is hit with this idea that we're fascists when that's a left-wing tilt. I mean, it's one of those things that for 30 years, I'm surprised that the right hasn't righted that and said, hey, wait a minute, no, it's the Democrats who are the fascists by and large.
Well, make the list of things they wanna do, starting with stealing your guns. I was worried about the American left that very much wants to take away your guns. I'm thinking, what plans do they have that they don't feel comfortable sharing with us until they've taken away our guns? Because I think the stuff they're talking about now is pretty disgusting and dangerous and threatening. But imagine what they'd sound like if the population was disarmed.
Yeah, that's a really good that's a scary, terrifying thought.
I would also recommend George Orwell's later writings. He had grown up as a socialist and therefore worked in the world adjacent to the communists. When he went to fight Franco in Spain as a socialist, and the group he was with was not the Soviet Union controlled one, and he expected to be murdered, along with his wife, when they were down there. He didn't know it at the time, but he learned it while he was down there that the communists viewed anyone who wasn't a communist in the anti-Franco movement as a bigger enemy than Franco. So they were doing massive purges and numbers of people that got killed. Uh, and so he wrote Animal Farm, which is a good short story. It's actually a story that younger readers could read. It's kind of a kid's book about a farm, but it's about the nature of totalitarianism. Um, in 1984, those two very powerful books speak to the danger of statism, uh, and I would recommend those both to somebody who's first of all, if you're going to be in the modern conservative movement, many of the people that you work with will have read those books, and if you haven't, they'll wonder about your foundation, and do what "Oh, dear, what do we have to teach this person to before you can let them write on their own?" But if you've read it and you get it and you can speak to it, all of a sudden there's a connection where people get, "I got it. I understand." You understand and have read if you read these books and gotten them, you understand them the way Reagan did, the way other people in American history have been, the way the guys in the modern Supreme Court do.
I would if I've asked this question to people, Grover, I'd say that, yeah, I mean, the books you've talked about would be top 5 for me. Anything by Ayn Rand, the William Chambers piece, the um, Road to Serfdom by Hayek. I mean, these are classics, and I think you're 100% right on. And Orwell too. It is interesting his evolution from kind of this socialist to a not socialist, I guess. Let's okay. So what's your pattern? What does Grover Norquist's week look like Monday through Friday? Do you take weekends off? Are you working 80 hours a week? Or I mean, what's your pattern?
I work pretty much straight through, and, during COVID, I was in the office every day. Now, most people worked from home, but I was safe from COVID because I was the only guy in the office. Uh, but, uh, when I'm writing a book, I will get up and be at the office by 5, write for 3 hours. I can write for 3 hours without falling apart or starting to get cranky. After a while, I go, "You stupid idiot," and you go, "Put the camera stop that one, come back and write when you're less cranky." But I can do 3 hours without getting tired, and
So if you're at the office at 5, then you're asleep at what, 10, 9?
yeah, you get for that, you gotta be up at 4, and you wanna get to bed earlier.
Early. Yeah.
But I don't I mean, I've written 4 books, and that takes a while. I'm in the middle of doing one now, uh, that, will simply be on organizing. It'll be sort of many people wanna write the book, to counter Saul Alinsky. What is the right of center Saul Alinsky book? And this is sort of that, but the temptation on writing the anti-Saul Alinsky book, and I happen to be at the Saul Alinsky Foundation along with his, uh, wife and others, to get a better appreciation of actually what he was working on and what he did do. Um, he was not a communist, for starters, and he writes about that and the dangers to the left in America about the communists and what they would how they would abuse the left of center. And mostly he was looking at stuff like, getting stores to hire more black people, and the same thing with the Chicago airport. We weren't looking at, you know, state socialism in a way that the left does now. But that said, but he had a series of arguments, many of which were use your opponents, the person you're trying to affect, their sense of self to shame them into doing the right thing, which is not a useful tool for conservatives to deal with liberals because the left can't be shamed into they know that after 50 years that the Great Society does not help poor people, okay? That the Great Society hurts people. They don't care. It's, what is the book with the lady who finds a guy with a broken leg, gets him healed up, he's about to leave, and she realizes he's gonna leave him and doesn't need him anymore, so she breaks his leg again, um, to keep him in the house. The left does that with poor people. They don't want them to get on their feet, and by poor people, I mean somebody who's just starting out, whether it's a young person or an immigrant or, somebody who comes from a background that hasn't been very successful, and they don't wanna help them to stand up, be on their own feet, and fly with their own wings, right? No, 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 no. Then how can you demand their vote and get to give you power if they're free and you help them be free? They don't really think they owe you anything. But if you break their leg and keep them crippled and make sure they don't go to work and don't have a decent school and they will always need you, well, then you're their friend. And it makes you feel important.
Right, right, right. I almost feel like we ought to pass an amendment to the Constitution that says if if you're on the government dole in any way, shape, or form, you have to kind of opt out of voting because it's like, it's like the court. I mean, what do they call that when you can't hear the case because you have a vested interest in the outcome of the, right? So I just think that I think George Will talked about this in a column multiple years ago. He said, when you get to the place where 51% of the American people are taking, right, or on the take in some way, you're not going to get government reform. I mean, we're not going to want to shrink the size of government because it's against their interest to do so. Yeah, it's tough. Well, this has been good. Before we close, I want you to tell people how to find you, your books, your writing, your website, all that stuff. So they can find you on Twitter. Are you on Twitter and social?
I'm on Twitter at Grover Norquist. I tweet at Grover Norquist. The organization is Americans for Tax Reform, and that's atr.org, atr.org. We have a good website, and we send out material on what's going on in taxes. Leave Us Alone is the name of our website, a podcast that goes out weekly. So that's the way to reach us. And if you're active in a state and you'd like to be put in touch with the state center right group, send us a note at ATR, and we will put you in touch with the state person who runs that meeting. And those meetings are all looking for new talent and people to get and be involved. And go to one of the center right meetings.
Yeah.
You just basically have to know people whoever runs the Republican Party, whoever runs the major conservative groups will know how and when to get in touch with them. And they're invite only. You can't just walk in because they want to know somebody and make sure you're not the other team sitting and trying to be annoying. But those meetings teach conservatives how to work with each other, how to speak to each other when you have disagreements, and not everybody's going to agree with each other. And it's center right for a reason. It's called center right. It's not the 50 most right-wing people in Ohio. It's the 50 people who, if everybody they represented voted, you'd win by 60% of the vote. You want to speak to a majoritarian movement because sometimes your candidate has too many DUIs and you'll lose some votes. And sometimes the other team will actually steal votes or collect votes that aren't really there. So you need to earn 60 votes in order to win. And that means it needs to be a broad coalition and always not compromising on principle, but actively going out to find people who are being damaged by the state, explain to them what it is and that how you'd love to work with them and on that. And then you've got an activist for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. Well, look, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And we will get this out and get all the resources to you and your team. We just are thankful for what you're doing. Wish you all the success. This is a big end of year, fundraising season. So I wish you guys the success at end of year and Godspeed, Grover. We'll see you soon.
Matt, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Take care.
Against the Current podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.